Hello, thanks for coming by this lecture. This is another important lecture to talk about system development approaches and open source software. If you remember, during our modules, we've been through different steps of what is information management and what is information system, what are the key components of doing this. And then if you are going to do a consultancy job or you want to develop a system, whether it is internet-based, mobile-based, you need to think about different approaches of doing this. And then the most advanced approach would be open source software. So the lecture would include key elements. What are the key elements of systems development, key approaches, and advantages and disadvantages of each approach. And then I'm going to take you through open source software in more details. Let's start with this confusion in your mind. Okay, now I need to replace my customer relationship management system with a new system. Now, do I have the capacity to do it in-house? Would I recruit somebody else to do it? Would I buy off-the-shelf package, which is well-known, like Oracle, SAP, any of these massive platforms that I can pay and ask people to come and install it in-house for me? Which approach I should follow? Which one is more beneficial? Okay, so 4 key approaches, well known. One of them is build your own information system, where you have specialists, IT specialists, business analysts. They will go and explore what is really needed in terms of job description, tasks, daily routines, and then they develop something, which might take time and might take cost as well, and expertise. The second approach would be a prepared package, off-the-shelf package, which is sold. It is available, easy to buy. It might be very expensive. It's been developed for another company, not necessarily your own institution. The third approach is outsource. Okay, so you are done. You don't have any capacity to do it in-house. You might delegate the development task to another team. Now, this could be IT vendor company who develop software. It could be through sending all your tasks to them so they can bring the software, install it to you, and try to customize it to your institution. Or as simple as this, they will send a team of experts, IT experts and business analysts, so they can study your institution and develop something for you, with you. And end user development. Now, end user development and prototyping are other approaches where you have more flexibility and different trials and testing chances. So if you look at this table with me, you will see every one of them has advantages and disadvantages. I will take you through each one of them step by step so we can explore these advantages. And I will be keen to give you part of our consultancy experience in developing real systems. So life cycle approach. Now, let's assume that you have a company and you wanted to develop a customer relationship management system or ERP system which connects between all of your divisions, from accountancy, purchasing team, marketing team. Now, you need to have a sort of needs audit to see what is really needed in terms of what are the job clashes, what is wrong in your routines, in your pipeline of production or service operations. And then once you have this prescription, you need to do a sort of management controls. Is this process linear or non-linear, or wicked somehow? So once you do this, you have a sort of analysis and description. We call it human activity analysis. So you start with a system analysis. You try to identify if there is an existing problem. Once you do this, you will try to come up with information requirements and data requirements, which means what should be there on every interface. What should be there as a sort of data and documentation for each stakeholder involved in the system. Once you do this, you become ready for the design stage, and then testing stage, conversion stage, and then maintenance stage. So if we take further steps after this table, the system analysis would start maybe with interviewing your own employee or the targeted institution's employee. You can do focus groups, you can do more observation, documentation analysis, and then you come up with a so-called requirement audit or needs audit, where you pave the road to the designer and the programmer to come up next. So system design lead to the so-called human-computer interface. If we are dealing with mobile phones, this would be the screenshot, how it would look like. If it is a PC or a laptop, this means we are talking about how the screen should look like, the layout, coloring, shading, all these human recognition elements that we need to consider in the interface. Now, behind this, there is a database where you manage files. A file leads to another file, tables with a specific ID, data ID, that lead to another table and vice versa. So we have entity relationship diagrams that talks about how these tables and data are connected. I urge you to go and read about entity relationship diagrams as a sort of data modeling stage where you can use it for the design and then develop the interface, the computer interface. Now, transformation of this design, we need to talk about conversion. So the conversion would start first with programming and coding something, and then you start to test how this interface would look like, how people can feel friendly use, feel comfortable when they use it. Conversion strategies could be actually 4 approaches. So I'm going to take you through each one of them. Parallel approach, where you gradually replace the old system with the new system. So you withdraw and you replace. Now this would happen maybe through a specific time period. It could be by specific function or specific branches. Pilot. Now pilot could be you test the new system on a specific division or a specific branch, and if it works, then completely replace the old system with a new system everywhere else in your institution. Phased. The phased is a gradual thing. So you work through step by step. If it works in this division, you replace it. You keep the old legacy system works in other institutions all the time, and then you replace it. So the difference between parallel and phased is that parallel, you always keep the old system while you ask people to work over time. But the phased one, you don't do this. Once the new system is accepted, you replace it and you don't keep backup, which is a disadvantage as well. Now the cutover, or we call it big bang, is that at a sudden you fancy something really out there because you think you did the right analysis, and then you replace it. You put it there, you forget everything about the past and old legacy. Now this is quite risky, but key examples of this, the NHS Choice website and the massive database that they developed. It's a web-based database. 20 million sterling pounds have been invested in this and cut over. Now the challenges that we still face is that GPs are not that connected. You might take up to 3 weeks to get your health records, which means the system is not that cloud-based or quite connected. And this is another problem with the cutover. So now we've spoken about these challenges when you think, okay, which approach would you follow? So we started with the life cycle approach, which includes system analysis, design, testing, and then you do maintenance. You need to have specific passwords, security controls, so you protect the system. Now, life cycle approach takes time, but in massive corporations, we need it. So, well, yes, you need to be careful when you think about life cycle approach. People might resist it, might accept it, but then because they are involved in the design and the development, somehow they own it, so the resistance will be less. Prototyping is another approach. Now, prototyping means you have a demo version or off-the-shelf package and they try to test it. Or you have a blueprint that's been designed for this institution long time ago and you start, test it. Or you might ask technicians to design something from their own experience and they go and test it. Now this could be lean approach, it could be rapid software development, it could be different approaches within the prototyping. But once you test it, you go back as a back loop, feedback loop, and then you fix the blueprint and you fix how it looks like, the data and information modeling inside it. An example of prototyping, and if you have a look at Apple, Apple have Apple Cooker and Testa, where they enable users to develop their own view of how the mobile handsets should look like, and then they take this as a prototyping and keep testing it. So it has actually two mixed things. So Apple has prototyping approach and end user approach. So end user development approach, frankly, you surrender everything to the power of end user, which means if you have a viral issue, a big institution, it's a bit risky to surrender all the development tasks to end users. However, you get less resistance, you get high satisfaction from end users, and it is still costly because you do lots of testing and you need to manage different, changes from different end users. So we've been through the life cycle approach, we've been through prototyping, we've been through end user development approach. Okay. Now, if you are running out of choices, then you might ask for an expert, which means external acquisition. So external acquisition means you will look for an independent IT vendor who can do something for you. In doing this, you need to plan the system development, you need to do system analysis, because if you don't do it right, you lose it all. And you know what? The consultant, the IT consultant or vendor, they might sue you and they might win. We will talk about request for proposal as the proposal evaluation and selection of vendors. Okay, so I'm going to take you through one of my personal experiences developing Craven Books system. So Craven Books is a comics and books, funny books producer. They get the text and they make it comics. It's an American company. They had a warehouse, massive warehouse, and what they used to do is to process orders manually. So what happens is that once a customer order is placed, the warehouse employee need to keep running around to bring different items. And this what leads to, at the end of this, they get tired, they get exhausted, and it doesn't efficiently manage the warehouse. So what they asked us to do is to develop something fashionable, smart system, and what we suggested is a sort of digital mapping, so electronic mapping machines. Now these electronic mapping machines are like digital arms connected to the shelves. So it tells you how many items from each book is available in each shelf. And then if there is a less storage, it means a red alarm on the system, so the purchasing team order more books from the producers and the publishers, and vice versa. So if you have extra stock of an item, we stop ordering from this book. It's not a blockbuster book, it's not highly demanded. And then what we've been through, it didn't really succeed. Even after analyzing what was there, somehow we didn't train the employees because we thought it's quite easy, logical. And the other side, employees keep moving the highly demanded shelves close to the main entrance. And this led to a disaster. Because what happens is that the purchasing team gets the wrong alarm and they buy the unneeded books where we had plenty of storage, and vice versa. So they started losing customers, and but I would say they didn't know what they really needed in the first place. This is why I'm going to take you through what are the key steps when you go ahead with outsourcing. Now, outsourcing actually happens these days a lot, especially with Indian companies, with Malaysian companies, with Egyptian companies, with where you have skillful people with lower labor cost. So you need to think of what is really needed. You need to do your own data requirement and needs audit. You need to know how much would you spend, why you need a new system, not the old legacy system, what would be the circumstances, and how you can keep a backup. These are initial thoughts if you think of a massive enterprise resource planning software, something like Oracle, SAP. These are very expensive things, and they would take time to be installed. These are examples of off-the-shelf packages that you can ask the outsourcing company to do for you. Now, outsourcing is a clear approach that we've been talking about, and starts with request for proposal. Now, there is a difference between request for proposition and request for proposal. Now, if you know what is the problem what is the problem, and actually you don't know what software would fit for the purpose, so you do request for specification, where you have an announcement and you send it to public, so all IT vendors would have access to it, and ask them frankly what sort of technology, regardless software, hardware, whatever it takes, that helps solving this problem, which means a request for a specification. And then they would tell you this is what it takes, this is what you need to do. And then you take this offer and you do request for proposal, which would include pricing and budgeting. Now, if you already know what is missing, if it is a specific module of a software, a specific hardware, a specific system, then you do request for proposal, which means you need to do a sort of bidding. You ask people to give their offers, how they do it with a cheaper price and shorter time. The vendor selection, you should keep up-to-date ranking. Now, there are different platforms that tells you how to evaluate your IT vendors. It depends on what sort of software you require. But you need to do this in up-to-date manner. You need to have a communication with accounting and finance, with the top management, to see what are your key priorities. Do you always have an issue with just-in-time processing? Do you need to have a shorter lead time of delivering to your final users? In this case, you need to deal with vendors who will deliver things faster for you with up-to-date 24/7 maintenance system. Or cost is the main issue. Then it depends how you really select your vendors. You need to align the vendor selection with the overall strategy. So outsourcing is not that easy. If you don't manage it well, you will lose it all. Okay, so why outsourcing? You need to think about cost. So if you do it in-house, it might be really very expensive. The quality is a concern. Now, you might do it in-house, but you cannot really guarantee the quality, while there is an off-the-shelf package developed by another outsourcing company who can implement it to you. Problem in performance, because the reporting system, the data requirements, key concepts don't match. So this is a disadvantage. You might need to re-engineer your organizational layout and processes, because frankly what you do doesn't fit with the software that you've been outsourcing. Why outsourcing again? For financial factors, for cultural factors, because if we are talking about governmental institution, for example, or a political communication system, they might need an independent party. They might prefer an independent person, an independent company, than their own people for transparency. Okay, now I'm gonna take you through another lecture, or I would say another element of this lecture. It's called open source software. So open source software is another approach of developing a system. Now what it is open, and there is a history during the Second World War and afterward, where Americans had open machinery principles, so factories and companies can share their machines day and night, so they can produce or share the production pipeline. Out of this, when we had the web and the internet, we started to think about how we can use cloud computing and computing as utility. So it's like water, it's like air. These things should be free for sharing. So open source software is a source code which has been developed by one of these skillful programmers. This person leaves the source code on the web, which is free, accessible for everybody. It's over time always available, not closed. Now it is risky as well, because everybody can go and check what's going on out there. So if you started to use open source software, you have to reuse it in your own way. So you might take it and put your own interface, you put other particularities, you change other things. So open source software is not closed. Now there is a big difference, because the closed source software, you cannot really change things. It has a specific capacity, so you cannot, maximize your users. If you have a season and then you want to serve more, so let's assume we are dealing with Debenhams, for example, and you want to deliver, a Christmas sale, so you doubled or tripled your customers. And if they do buy online, you need, something really flexible. So open source software, you can advance it and program it in a more flexible way than the closed source software. Open source software is more secure, because frankly everybody knows it, but then you need to upgrade the security things. Most of the case, open source software starts free, but then further maintenance and advancements are hidden. So you need to pay as you go style, or if you wanted to advance it. So what happens is that there is a developer, one or a team of developers, they start developing the source code, and then there might be other institutions who will take the source code in different ways. Some of them will take it for customer relationship, some of them will take it for registering and internal processing, some of them will take it in another direction. End of the day, the up-to-date source will be available on the web, so you can go and take the final output and keep building on it. Okay, usually you have a project lead. They use Trello software to keep, managing tasks, and then you have other volunteers who might go and experience this source code and develop it more. So what are the key advantages of open source software? It is available, easy to access. It gives you the freedom to change the interface, the processing pipeline, the information requirements, filing management. It doesn't depend on a vendor, so you don't need to stuck with a loyalty fees. You can always change things. The quality and the customization, it is open for everybody. So there is always upgrade and quality testing from just normal public people. Okay, now we've been through this important lecture to talk about system development approaches, including lifecycle approach, prototyping, end user development, outsourcing. We spoken about the details of each one of them, and we ended up with open source software, which is another approach quite important to modern society. Now, I want you to think of the Enterprise 4.0, which is a smart manufacturing era, which would be the title of what we say now. It's going to be system development for Enterprise 4.0, the fourth wave of manufacturing and smart engineering. Thank you for listening, and I wish you have a good day.